that I have been wearing non-stop lately. This is definitely one of my favorite spring pieces I picked up. This new
Today I'm going to simulate raising actual legendary monsters in real life. But these won't be just ordinary Pokémon you've seen in games or anime. I'm going to create unique elemental hybrids, fusions, raise them from birth when they can still fit in the palm of your hand, and follow their entire journey all the way to their final evolution and a battle capable of destroying an entire city. We're going to see what it would be like to share a world with creatures whose DNA consists of pure primal elements. And we're starting right now in my lab. I have 6 classic Pokeballs sitting on my desk. I'll start by grabbing the first 2. Out of the left one comes Froakie. Look at him, hyper-realistic, perfectly smooth.
Okay, this doesn't look like a Froakie, this looks more like a frog deer. Comment down below if you think the same.
With wet amphibian skin, and on his neck is a thick, snow-white foam that constantly bubbles and pops with a quiet, satisfying hiss. He looks cute, but out of the second Pokeball comes Charmander, a true, highly textured reptilian. His scales look tough, and on the tip of his tail...
I'm sorry for pausing this, but... what is this Charmander? I mean, it's rough. I mean, yeah, it's supposed to. But if you look
burns
at
a
the
real,
back,
scorching flame that makes the air around it distort. Now we're going to do what nature never intended. I place them both into a giant, transparent neon fusion capsule. The machine starts up with a heavy hum. Through the thick glass, we can see torrents of ice-cold water colliding with roaring fire. The capsule
Froakie does not have a tail. Well, maybe he does, I can't remember.
fills with dense glowing steam. Their DNA intertwines and there's a loud pop. The doors open, releasing a blast of hot air. Sitting on the table is our first baby, Char Froakie. His dark blue scales glow from the inside with an orange hue like cooling lava. His skin is constantly wet, but instead of soapy foam on his neck, actual volcanic craters have formed. Hot steam relentlessly bubbles and erupts from them. Moving on. The next pair is a complete contrast. The electric Pikachu and the ghost-type Gengar, yellow fluffy fur against a blob of dark ectoplasm. I load them into the capsule. This time, the glass doesn't fog up. It gets covered in frost patterns and cracks from the static tension.
Bello! Have you ever wondered what would happen if all Steel Brain...
The result exceeds all expectations. Meet Pikagen. This is a tiny, fluffy monster, but his fur is a deep purple shade with a glowing neon skeleton shining through. He doesn't have a normal tail. Instead, a blob of living darkness trails behind him, constantly shooting out sparks of purple lightning. He doesn't even stand flat on the table, but flickers slightly as if his textures are glitching. And finally, our third hybrid, who is meant to be the tank of this team. I take Bulbasaur with his green vines and fuse him with the colossal rock-type Unix. The capsule shakes as if an earthquake has started inside.
Wait, what? That's just Unix, right? I thought...
Bulbasaur with his green vines and fuse him with the colossal rock-type Unix.
Unix.
The capsule shakes as if an earthquake has started inside.
Mewtwo! Seriously, Greninja? No Mewtwo in this game?
Wow, so I'm just that worthless to you guys.
I'm not playing without Mewtwo. I'm done.
Yo, Mewtwo main here. Still need a carrot?
Crawling out from the clouds of stone dust is Bulbanix. This is a heavy, dense little snake made entirely of raw stone segments. The rocks are covered in ancient green moss and glowing runes, and on his back, instead of a normal flower bulb, a literal miniature stone tower is growing. So, 3 incredible creatures have been created. And at first, I decided I could raise them right in my house like normal exotic pets. I tried to simulate their everyday life, and it was absolute madness. For Charfroakie, I drew a normal bubble bath for him to swim in, but the moment this little guy dove into the water, his internal temperature turned the bathtub into a boiling jacuzzi. The water literally boiled, the room filled with thick fog, and his plastic toy ducks just melted away. Pikagen was even more fun. At first, he seemed super useful. He would walk up to my phone, touch it with his nose, and the battery would charge to 100% in a single second. But one day he sneezed, and a ball of lightning shot out of his shadow tail, burning a massive, smoking black hole right through my favorite couch. And Bulbanix turned out to be the calmest, but the most destructive to the interior. He just loved sleeping in the sunlight by the window. But while he slept, his roots, trying to find nutrients, shattered the expensive laminate in the living room, broke through the concrete floor, and grew straight into the basement, turning the floor into an actual dense forest. I fed them pancakes, berries, and chunks of raw meat. They ate out of my hands and seemed completely harmless. But the problem is that Pokémon grow, and they grow terrifyingly fast. In just a couple of months, these tiny creatures reach the size of large rhinos. My house could no longer hold them. Their elements started getting out of control and clashing with each other. When Charfroki simply breathed heavily, his boiling steam would scorch the beloved healing plants that Bulbanix was growing in the kitchen. This angered the stone snake. He would slam his tail and the walls of the house would crack. Pikagen, trying to calm them down, would accidentally short-circuit the power grid for the entire neighborhood. Living with them became physically impossible. My house looked like a war zone. I realized that these creatures were built to be apex predators, the masters of nature. Keeping them enclosed in 4 walls was a crime and a massive hazard. I made the only right decision. I rented a massive cargo transport helicopter and relocated them far beyond civilization, to a place ordinary people don't know about, the archipelago of elemental convergence. This is a massive chain of wild islands where magnetic anomalies and ancient energy create the perfect conditions for mutants like them. Here, they no longer need to hold back their power. As soon as we unloaded them on the islands, they instantly felt at home. The archipelago was divided into completely different ecosystems, and each of the fusions found the perfect biome for their mutated elements. And most importantly, once they were free, they started growing at a terrifying rate. After just 6 months, they had turned into true behemoths. Charfroki settled in the volcanic rift. Imagine a beach made of black obsidian, with the waves of a boiling sea hissing as they crash against it. He was now a massive steam dragon amphibian, standing 2 stories tall. I watched from a drone as he swam right inside the volcano's crater. Lava dripped down his wet blue scales without causing any harm, while the volcanic craters on his neck endlessly erupted with thick white steam. He became an absolute master of temperature control. I saw him take a hot geyser bursting from the ground and with one icy exhale, freeze it into a bizarre glass-like sculpture, and in the next second smash it with his fiery tail, turning the ice back into scorching fog. Pikagen chose the Static Crystal Caves, a giant underground network plunged in pitch darkness, interrupted only by the flashes of purple lightning. He had grown into a colossal shadow demon. The darkness around him became so dense it felt tangible. He learned how to phase. When hunting giant cave bats, he would simply leap through a solid crystal wall, dissolving into pure neon energy for a fraction of a second, and silently materialize out of the shadows right behind his prey. And Bulbanix became the true guardian of the archipelago. He made his home in the ancient mossy forest, where even the trees were made of petrified stone. Having grown to over 100 feet long, he crawled heavily and majestically among the cliffs, emitting a deep, grinding sound of stone plates scraping together. The strikes of his tail literally reshaped the landscape. The moment he forcefully slammed the ground, an actual fortress tower would erupt from the rock with a deafening crash, which his grass-type power would immediately wrap in thick, glowing healing vines. They lived in perfect harmony. But while my Pokémon were enjoying their freedom, on the other side of the world, in a secret underground government bunker, a disaster was brewing. Military scientists had tried to replicate my success, but their goal was to create the ultimate biological weapon. They spliced the DNA of the legendary telepath Mewtwo and the armored rock monster Agron. That's how Mewgron, the Psycho Rock Titan, was born. But unlike my Pokémon, Mewgron never knew love or care. His childhood was spent in a concrete isolation cell that looked more like a garbage pit. In a 10 by 10 foot dark room, he was locked in heavy chains and covered in sensors that dug directly into his stone armor. He was fed scraps that the scientists just dropped through a grate above. A massive shock collar was strapped to his neck. For the slightest disobedience or attempt to use his telekinesis, he was hit with lethal electric shocks. For months, he stared at a single gray wall, listening only to the hum of transformers. He wasn't evil by nature. He was exhausted, lonely, and incredibly enraged at the cruel humans who kept him in this hell. And one day, he reached his breaking point. When a guard threw an empty can at him, Mewgron's eyes flared with a blinding blue light. A massive telekinetic shockwave tore the shock collar to shreds. The concrete walls of the bunker, several feet thick, simply crumbled into dust. Amidst the wailing sirens, the Psycho Rock Titan, brushing rebar off his shoulders, stepped onto the surface for the first time. The military tried to stop him with tanks, but he just crushed them flat with a single wave of his hand, like tinfoil. He was free. But because of the brutal experiments, his DNA was highly unstable. To maintain his massive form and keep from falling apart, he needed a powerful energy source, and his extrasensory brain picked up on a colossal elemental vibration coming from the archipelago of convergence. The sky over the archipelago darkened. Mewgron crashed onto the island like a meteor. The shockwave leveled the stone trees in Bulbanix's forest. Our fusions instantly teamed up to defend their home. Bulba Nix roared, hurling massive boulders at the Titan, but Mugron disintegrated them into sand with just a glance. Charfroki unleashed a torrent of boiling water, but the Titan's psychic shield didn't even flinch. He tossed our behemoths aside like plush toys, but Mugron wasn't there for them. He needed energy. He tore through the steam straight toward Pikagen. An armored stone hand clamped around the Shadow Demon's throat. Pikagen sparked, trying to shock his enemy, but Agron's armor absorbed every bolt. Mugron launched into the sky, carrying our electric friend away toward an abandoned megacity to drain all of his life force. When Charfroki and Bulba Nix finally pulled themselves out of the craters, they saw only a ruined island. Their home was broken, but even worse, their brother had been kidnapped. Releasing a heavy, agonizing elemental roar, the two remaining Titans left their safe haven. They waded into the freezing ocean and began swimming toward the mainland. The hardest battle of their lives was waiting for them. The journey to the mainland was long and grueling. The massive steam dragon, Charfroki, swam ahead, leaving a thick trail of boiling water behind him, creating a dense, impenetrable fog over the ocean. Beside him, like a drifting, moss-covered rocky island, Bulba Nix heavily cut through the waves. They weren't driven by predatory instinct, but by something much greater, loyalty. They were coming for their brother. Several days later, the skyline of the abandoned megacity appeared on the horizon, or rather what was left of it. Mugron had turned the once thriving city into a post-apocalyptic wasteland. Skyscrapers were torn in half by an unseen force, roads were peeled open like tin cans, and a thick dust filled with the heavy scent of ozone hung in the air. Our Titan slowly stepped onto the shore. Under the sheer weight of the stone Bulba Nix, abandoned cars on the promenade crumpled with a deafening crunch. They found the Titan's lair right in the center of the financial district. Mugron was sitting on the ruins of the central stadium. Right above him, trapped in a sphere of dense blue telekinetic energy, Pikagen floated helplessly. His purple fur had lost its shine, and his lightning barely flickered. Mugron was ruthlessly draining his life force to stabilize his own crumbling stone armor. Seeing this, Charfroki let out an ear-splitting roar that shattered every intact window within a mile radius. He pushed off the ground and unleashed a pillar of scorching steam at Mugron, but the Psycho Rock Titan didn't even turn around. He simply raised his hand, and an invisible psychic shield split the boiling torrent in two. Bulba Nix lunged forward with a furious grinding noise, trying to wrap his heavy body around the enemy, but Mugron just clenched his fist. The gravity around Bulba Nix increased hundreds of times over, slamming him deep into the asphalt. Our defender's stone armor began to crack horribly, and the tower on his back started to crumble. Our fusions were strong, but against the ultimate biological weapon, they looked like mere children. Mugron raised his hand to deliver the final, fatal blow to the fallen steam dragon, when suddenly the sky above the city glowed red. The deafening roar of helicopter blades echoed. Dozens of military choppers formed a tight ring around the stadium. The government had tracked down the fugitive, and they weren't going to figure out who was right and who was wrong. Command made a ruthless decision to wipe out all the mutants at once, erasing this entire block from the face of the Earth. The lead bomber dropped an experimental hyper-EMP bomb, a payload of colossal radiation and electromagnetic power. The bomb landed right in the center of the stadium. Time seemed to slow down. A blinding white light flashed, swallowing all sound. A massive shockwave swept the helicopters out of the sky like dry leaves and turned the concrete into dust. But as the settling radioactive haze began to clear, the military realized their fatal mistake with sheer horror. They forgot the golden rule. The very thing that was supposed to kill these creatures became their ultimate catalyst. The Pokémon didn't burn. Their mutated cells completely absorbed this colossal blast of energy. Right in the epicenter of the crater, incredible transformations began to unfold. The telekinetic prison shattered, and Pikagen crashed to the ground. Having absorbed the electromagnetic pulse, he began to grow rapidly. His purple fur ignited with a blinding neon glow, the bones inside his body pulsing with pure plasma. He evolved into the Neon Phantom Thunder, an entity of pure energy capable of teleporting through space. Charfroki absorbed the thermal radiation. His blue scales were covered in impenetrable obsidian armor. The volcanic craters on his neck expanded, and now, instead of just flame, a concentrated blue plasma erupted from his jaws. He became the Steam Dragon Emperor, but Bulba Nix changed the most. Absorbing the energy of the Earth itself, ripped open by the blast, he stretched to the size of a massive skyscraper. Each of his scales became the size of a tank. The ancient runes on his body blazed with a bright green light, and the tower on his back transformed into an impregnable rocky citadel. He evolved into the colossal forest bastion. Now, the odds had changed. It was time for teamwork. Bulba Nix slammed his titanic tail into the ground with a primal roar. The entire megacity shuddered. Thousands of thick, glowing green roots burst from beneath the asphalt. Like steel cables, they tightly wrapped around Mugron's legs, anchoring him to the ground. Panicking, the Titan tried to rip them apart with his telekinesis, but the roots instantly regenerated, feeding off the Bastion's endless energy. Taking advantage of the immobilized enemy, Charfroki soared into the smoke-blackened sky. He opened his jaws and flooded the entire stadium with a sea of incredibly dense, boiling white steam. Visibility dropped to 0. Mugron was completely disoriented. His radar and extrasensory perception glitched in this thick, static-charged fog. It was the perfect moment for our assassin. Pikagen dissolved into the boiling steam. Thanks to his new form, he became a part of the storm itself. Moving at the speed of light, he silently materialized out of the blind spot right above Mugron's head. All the purple energy stored from the EMP bomb concentrated into his shadow tail. With a deafening crack of thunder, he delivered a devastating strike straight into the energy core of the Psycho Rock Titan. The sound of shattering glass rang out. Mugron's stone armor, which seemed indestructible, crumbled to pieces. A bright flash illuminated the city and the giant Titan dropped to his knees, completely drained of his power. The experimental monster had been defeated. The military watched in shock through surviving satellites, not daring to even approach. Charfroki, Pikagen, and Bulbanix formed a tight circle around the fallen enemy. They could have easily finished him off, but animals are sometimes wiser than humans. Bulbanix gently touched Mugron's broken armor with his glowing vines. Our fusions felt his pain. They realized he wasn't evil. He was just a broken toy of the scientists who had spent his whole life trying to break out of his cage and feel freedom. Leaving the exhausted but alive Titan among the ruins so he could find his own peaceful path, our Pokémon let out a triple victory roar. The crack of thunder, the hiss of steam, and the grinding of stone merged into a single symphony. Having avenged their brother and saved each other, they turned around and began the journey back, home to their archipelago. Thank you to everyone who watched this incredible simulator all the way to the end. Creating this cinematic universe with hyper-realistic Pokémon was an absolute blast. If you love this storyline and want to see me create new, even crazier mutations, be sure to click on this video that just popped up on your screen. Today, I'm going to simulate raising...
Okay. And bye, guys. No, that was just like, yeah. But, bye.